Camille Meadows. It's fortunate that a space has opened up for you here at Edelvine. Our climate can be quite competitive.
This is our table. Scram.
No, I'm good here. That light keeps flickering.
It must be the ghost again.
Some girl supposedly killed herself in the dorms years ago.
I'm not sure I believe it.
What if I told you there's a way we can find out?
So you're gonna do a seance?
Spiritus oratio nostra, oporte loquantur inter vos.
I have tragic news. One of your classmates passed away tonight.
I really think we need to tell someone what's going on.
What, that we conjured a ghost and now it's killing us?
If anything scares you, hit it in the skull. If someone dies in a bad way, the energy imprints on the surroundings. And if you're sensitive, you can pick up on it.
Edelvine ghost, rise up to us. Edelvine ghost, rise up to us.
I hope you don't make me regret our decision to enroll you.
So welcome back to this week's episode of the Rock and Roll Ghost podcast. This week we have filmmaker Simon Barrett, who wrote two of my favorite films of the last decade, You're Next and The Guest, and he's out with his feature directorial debut, Seance, which is coming out via Shudder, correct?
Well, it's coming out in theaters and on VOD this Friday, and it'll be on Shudder at some point later in the year.
But they're the distributor, correct?
No, RLJE Films are the distributor.
Oh, okay. My apologies.
Shudder has so the way it works with the Shudder RLJE stuff, and I'm just learning this kind of myself, is there are like Shudder originals, which are like the movies that Shudder acquires that are just like on Shudder.
Gotcha.
I'm trying to think of like something like Host, and I think Anything for Jackson are like Shudder originals in the US. And then Seance is a Shudder exclusive, meaning that it's actually coming out through RLJE Films, but Shudder bought the exclusive streaming rights whenever it comes out on streaming. But that probably won't be for a few months, actually. But that just means that it won't be on, Netflix or Amazon Prime or any of the others. It'll be exclusive to Shudder. So Shudder are involved in the acquisition, but they're not distributing it at this stage. It's more like when it heads to the streaming services, it'll be an exclusive Shudder title. Like so that's the extent to which that's like how that makes sense. So you'll see like you might like, so I think the Shudder logo might be on it, but it's like
it was like
it's a complicated thing
I remember seeing. So
it is on there, but they're not the distributor because they don't really do that yet. It's a complicated thing with them in RLJE, but I'm figuring it out. It's like so like Mandy is like a Shudder exclusive, and Seance is like a Shudder exclusive because they're getting like this theatrical VOD, window first through RLJE. Yeah.
Right. Good company actually with Mandy. I've talked about that with a couple other people recently, and that is another one of my favorites of the past 10 years. That was that's like I think that's widely seen as kind of Shudder and RLJE's like biggest success. I think it's one of the biggest budget films they released. I mean, it's a fairly big budget movie, especially compared to Seance. But I quite enjoyed Mandy as well. I definitely thought I liked that better than Beyond the Black Rainbow, personally. That's what I haven't seen. You probably see a lot more kind of obscure films than sometimes I probably even do. I think you're a little more into the know about some of these than even I am, quite honestly.
Possibly. I do watch a lot of obscure films. I only know, I met Panos Cosmatos at a AFI Fest, I think, when we were there with ABCs of Death, and he had Beyond the Black Rainbow there. So that was just so part of the way I see all these obscure films is I go to film festivals with my own obscure movies, and then I stick around and I watch what the other filmmakers have, and that's
pretty cool, actually.
So well, I mean, that's honestly like I asked to be on a jury at the Fantasia Film Festival last summer because I was just sitting in my apartment going crazy finishing Seance during the pandemic. And I just wanted to watch those movies. So that's how I saw like Anything for Jackson, which we just mentioned, which is one of my favorite films of last year. Certainly a horror movie that I think like any diehard horror fan should seek out Anything for Jackson, because I think it's doing something really original. But yeah, that's like an obscure Canadian film, made I think for less money than Seance, though I could be wrong about that. So that's how I see stuff, is just through festivals and chatting with people mainly.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk a little bit about Seance. So I was able to watch it last night, and I got to say that I was I liked the fact that I kind of had some things right, but I loved that I actually didn't have it all figured out.
Cool.
Because there's a great the last half hour is actually really revealing in a lot of ways, which is fun. And it also had the great thing, which I was watching last night in the dark before I went to bed. And I'm kind of here and there with horror films, but as long as if it starts getting me like nervous about what's going to happen, then I usually am pretty well sucked in. If I'm laughing at it, usually it's something I'm not going to like. But if I'm like actually nervous about somebody coming out and killing someone or grabbing someone or something like that, then I feel it works.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal, isn't it? I mean, I would say that comedy, of course, has a place in horror, and certainly I think Seance is a pretty funny film by my at least in terms of my goals for it. I don't know if people actually find it, amusing. Of course, that's my own.
There are definitely moments, yeah.
Specific sense of humor.
Laughing at a horror film.
Oh no, I think I totally got it. but I do think the goal of like a horror filmmaker, if you're really trying to make a scary movie, and I have to be honest, I wouldn't say that this was necessarily my complete goal with Seance, but I would say that I do hope to attempt this level of like kind of extreme horror like cinema in the future. I do think your goal isn't to scare people while they're in the theater. It's to scare them while they're lying in bed that night. It's to scare them like when they when they're alone in the house or their apartment, and they hear something creak. That's and they think of your movie, and that's when that a horror movie's really made an impression, is when it scares you like after the fact, and like you think about it after the fact. Yeah.
That happened to me last night. Actually, I went to bed and I thought I was about to fall asleep, and I swear to God, I heard this weirdly weird loud noise that startled me, and I was just looking around the room for 5 minutes.
Oh yeah,
it's like,
it
definitely unnerved me enough to just get, because there's a lot of that kind of claustrophobic thing going on. You through the way you filmed it and wrote it and it was edited, there's a lot of really good, kind of scare moments, and there's a lot of imagery that, kind of sits in the back of your head.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear all that. I mean, a weird thing about Seance is I don't, and especially honestly doing the press for Seance and doing things like recording my commentary track, which I just got high and did in my apartment. I'm sure it's terrible. But like, but like I didn't know how else to do it, because I don't know what people want to hear about Seance, because I have no idea what people's response to the film is, because this was a pandemic movie. There weren't like any film festivals to really sell this at, so it hasn't screened anywhere. I have not seen the only time I've seen Seance with an audience is over at Inanna Sarkis's house. She had a few friends over to watch it, and that was the only time I've like actually seen people who haven't watched the movie before respond to it. But I don't know that Inanna Sarkis's friends are like the specific, demographic by which I can like really judge the film. I hope so. They seem to like it, but I think they're predisposed to be favorable since they know her. So it's a tricky thing. So I don't really know. I actually honestly don't, like, as a filmmaker, especially when you're directing your first feature, you don't really know, how well it's working. And especially if you direct your first feature and right around the time you finish, like, you know, your director's cut of the edit and such, you know, a pandemic happens and the world gets very small. So you know, a very kind of strange thing about Seance is I think it's very good. I'm quite proud of it. But of course I would be. I can't be objective about it in the slightest, you know, and for that matter, when I watch the movie, I have a completely different experience of it than, you know, anyone else. I'm entirely thinking about just the decisions that were made and, you know, the actors and such. So I'm just kind of getting now, you know, first impressions of the movie, and, you know, some people like it, some people don't, which is fairly standard for my work, I would say. But I'm gratified to hear you say that some of the scares really landed for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I thought it was an interesting story. The characters were clearly defined. I liked a lot of the performances. I did get and I'm not saying I'm not accusing you of like stealing or anything. I'm saying there was a nice craft homage.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Look at the girls, you know, and stuff.
You know, it's funny. Like I had not really seen The Craft until pretty recently. My friend Lee Janiak, who I'm friendly with, she was attached to direct a remake for a little while. Yeah. And it was when like she was doing that I actually went out and watched the original for the first time. Yeah. So I only saw that actually just a few years ago. So oddly, like I was probably more influenced by like the poster for The Craft as a kid, because I think maybe when it came out, like I don't know why I didn't see The Craft when it came out.
That seems surprising, actually. Yeah,
it is surprising. I either was unable to see it when it came out due to my age or like age restrictions or something, or I just like couldn't get to it for whatever reason. You know, I did grow up in a small town in mid-Missouri, and you know, it was kind of random what would like play in Columbia, Missouri, because we didn't really have an art house or anything like that when I was growing up. Not that The Craft would play art houses, but anyway. No. Anyway, for whatever reason, I didn't actually see the original Craft until quite recently. And I actually haven't watched, I know Lee did not end up directing the reboot. I believe someone else did. And I
haven't seen the remake. It was like, you know, Flatliners or some other ones where it's like, I don't understand the point of remaking it.
Yeah. I have to admit, I sat out the Flatliners remake myself. Yeah, I know, you know, the cast of the new Craft, there's some cool people in it. I should watch it one of these days, but I probably won't. Yeah.
Anyway, so, well, how did the idea of Seance first come to you? How long ago did you start working on the script? Because you obviously started it as writing. Did you intend for it to be your directing debut for a feature, or did you know, what was the situation there?
Well, I thought my feature directorial debut was going to be the first script I ever had go into production, which is called Dead Birds, which was produced back in 2003. That was the first script I wrote for myself to direct, and I wrote like a low budget horror movie, thinking like this is what I can probably get financed for under 100K. Ended up actually selling it to a studio through a negative pickup deal with Sony. They produced it for $1.5 million. Steve Yedlin, who shot like The Last Jedi and stuff, he shot it. You know, it was shot on like 35 millimeters, like a legit production with a real director, Alex Turner, who was coming off some kind of cool music videos and short films at the time, and the studio wanted to work with him. We got along great. It was a great experience, but I wasn't directing myself. It was Alex's, kind of all Alex's choices from that point. And, you know, and so I kind of was always trying to figure out like how I was going to start to direct from that point. But I was becoming successful as a screenwriter. And because that was like my first thing, people thought I was just a screenwriter, and you know, and it was really working with Adam, who kind of understood that I'd been way more hands-on with kind of like my early low budget, you know, short films and such. You know, working with Adam, you know, when we went off to do A Horrible Way to Die, which was under 100,000, that was when I kind of started to get more into like practical filmmaking again, but as a producer. Because Adam was directing and you know, and was doing amazing work. So I was very happy, you know, with the way Adam directed and edited and doing stuff that honestly I'm just not capable of with digital video. You know, the way he shot those movies. I mean, he basically, you know, operated the camera, you know, 100% of the time in A Horrible Way to Die. You know, that's not something I could do. That's specific to like Adam's talent. So in that case, you know, in that collaborative artistic relationship, I think we both felt like we had a lot of creativity and freedom, you know, and we gave each other kind of a lot of space to you know, to be original and to do interesting work. So I didn't start writing Seance until about 2014 when we were doing The Guest, and it kind of started to feel like, I was becoming less useful as a producer. I mean, I didn't take a full producer credit on that film because I didn't do anything really. I took a co-producer credit because I was there throughout the whole process giving input, but I didn't feel like I was like as necessary as I had been before, where I was like really doing like all the work of kind of like getting these movies made. And so, you know, so with that, I kind of started thinking like, now it's time, you know, I've put kind of my own career aspirations towards directing on hold for, you know, over a decade, in a smart way, because I was making, you know, I was able to make somewhat of a living as a screenwriter at that time, which is a very lucky thing to be able to do. It's a good job. Yeah. So I was happy. And then working with Adam, I was also kind of creatively fulfilled because, you know, I was in the loop on everything, but increasingly doing projects like Blair Witch, you know, there was some stuff for me to do on set, work with actors on like kind of improvisational stuff and things like that. But like, mostly there just wasn't a function for me there if I didn't have like a camera in my hands and I wasn't doing something. So that was when I kind of was like, well, let me try to do what I did back in 2003 again, which is come up with a low budget horror movie that I think I can get financed, that I want to direct myself. And, you know, the inspiration just came from a lot of old gialli and slashers and the films that I kind of initially took inspiration from as a teenager, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Where did you end up filming Seance?
That would be in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Okay.
And you'd obviously shot that before the pandemic. How long was the shoot?
The shoot was 22 days. We filmed from basically, I want to say with a break. We didn't take actually a break for Thanksgiving because we were up in Canada. We worked on Thanksgiving. And there were only 3 Americans on my film, Madisen Beaty, producer Connie Hoy, and Marlena Fihuri and myself. So 4 Americans. So we didn't do Thanksgiving. So we just kind of went straight from like, I think November 19th to like December 20th or so. But that ended up being 22 days just because of how those weeks panned out with, you know, like kind of Canadian holidays and such. So yeah, 22 days, November, December of 2019.
That's pretty cool. How did the shoot go for you?
Well, I mean, I guess it went really well in that I felt like we got everything we needed. I admit that like when I finished the shoot, I was kind of like, you know, I might want to reshoot some of those close-ups. You know, I might want to do like a pickup to do like, you know, some kind of like opening credit sequence or something. And then the pandemic happened. And I was very glad that I felt like that, because then it was like, well, wait, we didn't have any money for reshoots anyway. So I was kind of thinking like Kareem Hussein and I, the director of photography, and I would probably be doing like a no budget version of that in his apartment. But like, you know, that's stuff like that works. Doug Lyman, when editing Go, there's a shot in the movie Go that's a curtain setting on fire, and it's they actually filmed it in the editing suite because they realized they needed that shot, and so they just like got a lighter and lit the curtain in the editing suite and cut it into the movie. So like sometimes that works, you know. Sometimes you can just get quick little pickups. With Seance, 100% of what you see in that movie is stuff that we got in Winnipeg during those 22 days. So I would say overall the shoot went very well, and that when it came time to edit the movie with our editor James Vandewater, I was like, okay, we do have a movie here. Like, I don't need anything. I'm not, because You're Next, we did a little bit of a reshoot. The Guest, we did a couple of days of reshoots. Blair Witch, we did a couple of days of reshoots. It's very common, you know, after a shoot to pick up a couple of days if you were missing a couple things, or just like, you know, once you get into the edit, you realize you're missing something. Seance never had that safety net. And so I would say the shoot went really well in that we got the film in that time allotted, and, you know, we're able to release it, you know, and it was profitable, I should say. You know, we were able to sell Seance for a profit. So, you know, so it went great. Yeah. I hope people like the film, but yeah, other than that, it went great.
How did it feel getting to direct your first feature, and what kind of, were there any obstacles during filming that you kind of had to, I mean, you always have obstacles when you're making it, because no matter how much you plan, there's always going to be something going on. But was there anything that happened that you had to work around?
Oh, I mean, you know, literally, and I like literally every hour, like every day. You know, like everything from like when we were filming outdoors, we could only get we had a crane for half a day, but we could only get the cheapest crane in Winnipeg. Cause I think nobody in Tales from the Hood 3 had like the other cranes booked. So we had like the crane that like didn't have any automated really parts, and it was so cold that the wheels froze. So we had to rock it back and forth to warm up the wheels. And then we had like, basically 15 seconds to get the shot, before the wheels would start to freeze again. Stuff like that. I mean, that's like an obvious example, but like, this was a movie that I made. It was my first directorial film. I did not work with a single person on it who I'd worked with before. Normally, I think when writers go off to direct, they try to like write roles for the actors they know, or get their friends to produce it. But I didn't have that opportunity because Adam was off doing Godzilla versus Kong, and everyone was just I was kind of on my own. So it was stressful because you're ultimately responsible for everything. I mean, again, we didn't have a real contingency on Seance. Like I had to make our days, and I had to get the scenes in the time allotted, or we just weren't going to get them. There was no going back to these locations. So there was always that extreme level of stress. At the same time, being able to kind of creatively work with the actors and compose the shots myself with Kareem, and work with Marlena Fihuri to do to design what the rooms would look like. All that was tremendously gratifying because I was like involved with those conversations, when I'm working with Adam on stuff, but ultimately Adam's the director. It has to be his decision. And I'm always respectful of that. I'll give my input, but at the end of the day, it's Adam's choice. And usually I agree because I think Adam's really good at what he does. But It's nice to be able to, do your thing and have a movie that I can say, look, that was made under some difficult circumstances, and I'm not 100% maybe happy with everything about it. But yeah, that's all me. Like for better or worse, that was all that I thought this music was great. I thought these shots were great. I thought these outfits were great, and that's why they're in the film.
Yeah, one of the things I especially liked, and I'd seen her name around before, but I don't know if I've seen Suki Waterhouse in anything before. But I ended up really liking her.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, Suki's great. I would say Suki's interesting because I'd seen almost everything she'd been in before I even met with her. I just watched, I think I hadn't seen like Detective Pikachu yet. So I watched it right before I sat down with her for the first time. And it's interesting because like, I feel like having worked with her now that like, I really would love to see her do more action oriented roles. Cause I'd never really seen her do what she did in Seance. And I wasn't initially, because of that, I wasn't kind of initially convinced that it would work. I'd seen her do kind of a version of it in movies like The Bad Batch and Assassination Nation. But those films, whether you like them or not, are very specifically kind of doing their own thing. That's very different from Seance, kind of tonally and in every way. And so I kind of wasn't sure like what would be her take on kind of the like hard-boiled protagonist that I was kind of going for with Seance. And then, and then I found out that like her take on it was that like she is it, like she really gets that character on a pretty serious level. So I loved working with Suki, and I hope, Seance is a small movie. I know that it's not like, it's not Godzilla versus Kong or anything like that, but I do hope that people, see Seance and they see Suki's work and they're like, oh, she's very good at this. And because I would love to see her get more kind of just weird roles like that. I think she's very interesting in them.
Yeah, the cast in general, I really liked, which was kind of surprising. I wasn't, I have a thing when I see a bunch of younger actors that I've never really necessarily seen in anything before. I tend to think, it's like, a CW show or something, and that wasn't the case here.
Well, I think actually a lot of my actors in Seance are in like a bunch of Hallmark movies.
Yeah.
Which might be what you're responding to, because we only had 4 weeks to prep Seance. So Suki was attached, but no one else was.
Right.
By the time when I went into pre-production, we only had 4 weeks, which is normally half of what you'd have for a film like Seance.
Right.
Usually you'd have 8 weeks of hard prep. And 6 would be like tight. We had 4. So that included casting. Like I had to cast all the roles in that time allotted with available actors. So I ended up casting a lot of local Winnipeg talent. Because that was what I could afford because they lived there. And they went towards our tax credit and so on. But B, because Winnipeg actually has a immense kind of theater scene. And like, you know, because so many movies shoot there because of the tax credits, there is a amazing local talent pool. So I specifically looked at shows like Channel Zero that I knew filmed in Winnipeg, and other kind of projects like which my friend E.L. Katz directed the last season of that. So I was able to really pick his brain a lot about it. And he's really kind of why I wanted to shoot in Winnipeg to begin with, just because he spoke so highly of the crews and locations. Which turned out to be true. I mean, we had just an amazing crew on this film, and locations were a challenge, but you know, I think the movie looks good. So you know, I share your kind of knee jerk. I mean, it's why we probably both haven't watched the Craft reboot, right? Like you kind of have this you're like, well, who? I don't recognize these people, and as a viewer, you know, when you see a trailer, like you sometimes feel like, oh, maybe this isn't a real movie. But you know, I think like there's enough recognizable faces in there for younger viewers. I think that they probably won't have that reaction as much as maybe you and I do, to be honest. And then beyond that, it is, you know, it's true. I used a lot of actors who mostly do Hallmark movies, like Megan Best and Jade Michael and Stephanie Sy and people like that in Winnipeg, Marina Kerr. And but the thing is, like, those people, they're good actors. Like, if you can do a Hallmark movie, you can actually pretty much do anything. And if you're good in a Hallmark movie, you're probably going to be really good in anything, because, you know, those shoots are like $1 million. They shoot them in like a couple weeks. I assume, you know, if you're shooting at that schedule, you're getting very limited coverage and very minimal takes. So, you know, so it's kind of like, you know, Madisen Beaty, who I cast in the film as the character of Bethany, you know, I'd seen her in The Clovefitch Killer and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So I knew she was good, but it's one thing to be good in a movie that, like, it's one thing to be good in like a Tarantino movie that had 100 shooting days. It's another thing to be good in like a Hallmark movie. So I was actually much more interested in like Madison's work in The Clovefitch Killer, which I knew was like I think a similar budgeted film to Seance. So yeah, so, you know, you see young actors who do kind of, you know, CW type stuff. And I think a common mistake would just be to be like, that's all they're capable of, and not sit down with them and be kind of like, okay, but we're doing something like different now. Because you know, whenever I say that to an actor, generally 9 times out of 10, they're like thrilled to be doing something different, you know, especially an actor like Megan Best or Jade Michael, who play Carrie and oh my God, Lenora. Sorry, I'm recovering from a vaccine shot, like I said. The characters of Carrie and Lenora, respectively, you know, they're always just getting cast as, you know, it looks like the best friend in the romantic comedy, like the pretty girl, you know, the like Megan Best is the girl on the bus and nobody who Bob Odenkirk saves from being harassed. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
No, I haven't seen it yet, no.
So I think for her, it was fun to play just like a different type of character, you know, and sometimes you can get really interesting work from people if you kind of, you know, just are like, hey, I just want you to do something opposite from what people normally ask you to do, because most people are just thrilled to hear that. And I mean, most filmmakers would be thrilled to hear that too, you know? Because everyone's kind of put in their box, especially I think actors.
I agree.
Especially I think young women, to be honest. I think there's just not a lot of interesting roles for young women. And I'm not going to like pat myself on the back here and say that like Seance is some nuanced character piece, but you know, it is the kind of thing where like, just by being like, no, I want your character to be like a total jerk. Like that alone gives an actor like something fun and new to do. Like Jade, I don't think Jade's ever really played an obnoxious bully before, and she's so good at it. It's like it's insane to me that she hasn't done it before. Yeah. So anyway.
No, that's cool. I don't want to. We're a little bit over right now.
No, I'm sure Sam's gonna.
I just have 2 quick questions. We can wrap it up. One, what are you working on next? Is there something you're writing, or is something you're planning on writing to direct?
Well, I'm attached. I'm writing Face Off 2 and the Thundercats adaptation.
That's right.
I'm working with Adam Wingard on both those projects. So we have those in development. We have some other projects in development as well that haven't been announced yet. And I've already directed a segment of I don't know if it's a Shudder exclusive or a Shudder original yet. We'll find out. But I did already direct a segment of the horror anthology sequel that you forgot to ask for, VHS 94. So I've already shot part of a new horror anthology coming soon. Coming perhaps soon to theaters near you. I don't know. Actually, we need to finish it first. And I'm getting texts like right now about it. So,
well, I'm very eager to because about Face Off 2 and Thundercats, even though I didn't watch the original cartoon, I think the fact that you guys are doing that might be interesting to me because I love you and Adam together. And so the final question I actually have is, not about you, but it's about Adam. What did you think of Godzilla versus Kong? Because I absolutely, I know you're biased, but I absolutely loved it. And I think he did one of the best out of the four.
Oh yeah. I mean, so I'd seen all those MonsterVerse movies in the theaters just as like a big monster movie fan, I mean, Adams, I can't really be objective about it, but I think Adams is really good and definitely my personal favorite. And also furthermore, like just as a kid, I remember renting King Kong versus Godzilla, the original 60s version or whatever, and just being so staggeringly disappointed by it. Cause you just want it to be nonstop monsters fighting, at that age. And I feel like Adam delivered the closest version to that, the closest version to like what I wanted that movie to be as a kid of like any of the Godzilla films. And, look, that's I think some people, I've seen some reviews of it that are just like, this movie is too silly, and it's like, well, I'm sorry. Like before I watched Godzilla vs. Kong with Adam and, we went with our buddy Lee Winnell to see it at an IMAX screen. I saw the trailer for Fast 9. So you can't tell me like Adam's being too silly, it's just a matter of deciding what kind of the tone is. Yeah. And I think Adam made the choice to go for just a more fun, sillier tone with that movie. And I think it was a great choice.
I think it was a great choice as well. I had a lot of fun watching it, and I'm very eager to see what you guys are going to do with each other in the future, but I don't want to take up too much of your time.
I think I got to run.
Maybe the next time we'll talk longer.
Indeed. Hopefully there is a next time and I get to make another movie.
I'm sure you will. Thank you. And you have a good rest of your day, Simon.
All right. Thank you, Brett.
Bye.